Welcome in, everyone. We are all watching the College Football Playoff Selection Committee's rankings, and we've made our way up to number 16. Appreciate everybody being here. So we'll check out the rest of the rankings, of course, and talk to all of you. All right. 16 through 20. 16 through 20. Iowa gets a little love behind Texas A&M, though. Texas A&M 16, Iowa 17, Pitt 18, San Diego State 19, NC State 20. Pitt should get to that ACC championship game, but they got to beat Virginia this week. And NC State took it on the chin against Wake Forest this past week. Let's see what they do with Wake Forest winning their best game so far this year. Man, they skipped through the boom, 20 through 25, boom. Then the 16 through 20, they're hanging out here. Let's get to it, boys. Yes, Pitt has lost to two pretty marginal teams. The next five there, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15 with Baylor, with Ole Miss, with Oklahoma falling to 13. BYU and Wisconsin. Wisconsin's obviously on a roll. Oklahoma finally, their issues caught up with them. They only scored 14 points against Baylor, down by 2 spots from Baylor. Makes sense like that. I think I got Oklahoma right behind Baylor. I've got Ole Miss up at 10. All right, to the top 10, folks. Let's go. See what you guys have. Reese is telling us the lowest ranking at this point, week 3 of the rankings, to make the Final Four, number 9. Yes, the real MVP. Like the video. Everyone, please like the video. We are going to be here for quite a long time talking about the rankings, the games coming up this weekend, whatever you guys want to talk about. But it is a rankings watch party. I'm not necessarily seeing a lot of issue at this point. It doesn't necessarily agree with my rankings, but to a T. Yeah. Kirk Herbstreit is explaining their thought process, which I agree with. I agree with the committee looking at resume every week and tearing apart, basically starting it from the ground up each and every week. I think that's the way it should be. A lot of you guys respond to my rankings and say, why did this team only drop 2 spots or 3 spots? And it's not about dropping or raising a team, because the entire season needs to be looked at again each and every week from the ground up. There's Wake at 10. I believe I've got Wake at 10 or 11, something in that range. Wake, please win the rest of your games. Beat Clemson. So even though Clemson's not in the rankings, that's going to gain some attention. If they beat Clemson on the road, beat Wake Forest. Wake Forest beat Clemson on the road. Do it, do it, do it, and win the rest of your games and win the ACC with 1 loss. I want that. I want that. So Frosty Monk says here, interesting that the Pac-12, other than Oregon State, gets no respect, but Oregon has been considered the underdog in multiple contests, including the upcoming game against Utah. Okay. Oregon's been the underdog against Ohio State. Where has Oregon been an underdog? Maybe they were at UCLA by a point. That's really not being an underdog if you understand what that tells us. That just tells us they're on the road. But Oregon's not been an underdog in the Pac-12. The Pac-12 is awful. The Pac-12 should be given no respect. It's just not a good conference. It's not a good conference. When I say no respect, you know what I mean. Yes, there are good players in the Pac-12. There are teams that are okay. It's not a good conference. It is by far, Frosty Mug, the worst conference. You can go through any measurement that you want that's legitimate, and the Pac-12 is the worst conference. And it's not really that close. For as bad as the ACC is, Pac-12 is much worse. Now, they might get a playoff team in. That doesn't always relate. You could have a top 4 resume, but be from the worst conference. It's happened before. Has not happened recently. Notre Dame at 8. Of course, you got to keep Notre Dame behind Cincinnati for obvious reasons. You almost could consider the Cincinnati-Notre Dame situation similar to the Ohio State-Oregon situation. Notre Dame's resume is so much better than Cincinnati's, but they lost to Cincinnati. I've got Cincinnati ahead of Notre Dame. I've got Oregon ahead of Ohio State. And what David Pollock's talking about right now is kind of the difficulty in the rankings, too. Do you want the rankings to be a reflection of where teams are right this second, or over the course of the entire season, taking all the data points into account? We're going to take where these teams are right now. I'll take Wisconsin as a top 10 team, but their resume is not a top 10 team. What Ole Miss did this past weekend was pretty impressive in putting the defense on Texas A&M. So there are some things that we're kind of slow to coming around on because we just think that's the way it's always going to be. That's the way it's always been. The Big 12 doesn't play defense. If you look at the scores in the Big 12, they're not high. The Big 12 is not just this offensive league right now. It's not. It's no different than the other leagues now when it comes to offensive, defensive balance. And the other one being that Ole Miss can't play defense. That was last year. That was the year, especially the year before. Then that was last year. Ole Miss played exceptional defense Saturday night against Texas A&M. So Alabama stays at 2. New Mexico State strengthened that number 2 ranking. Oregon played a decent Washington State team, beat them by 2 touchdowns. Ohio State played a much better Purdue team, throttled them. Oregon State's put at 3. Okay. Yakov 22. Mark, have you ever been to Waco or Stillwater? No, that has not been a destination of mine for a Baylor game. My brother went to Baylor for 1 semester or 1 year, something like that. Stillwater, Oklahoma State. I have not. Ohio State at 4. I've only been to SEC and Big Ten games. I've never been to any other college football game other than those two, except the MAC. Been to MAC games. This could be it right there. That 4 could stay right where they are. Yeah, long way to go. The Buckeyes have the toughest road. They are in the midst of the toughest road. Penn State, Nebraska, Purdue. They've navigated, but Michigan State, Michigan, a Big Ten championship game. Still 3 toughies left. Cincinnati at 5. SMU's coming up for the Bearcats. Conference championship game most likely against Houston. Unless SMU beats Cincinnati, and then we don't care about Cincinnati anymore. Squid is saying Cincinnati is not a playoff team, and I tend to agree with you. I think that any team that goes undefeated, we should have a playoff system for them. There should be a playoff system that allows for undefeated teams to play, but we just don't have enough spots. We don't have enough spots for Cincinnati, and they don't play a good schedule. We cannot reward teams for playing one game. Cincinnati's played one game. And then 2 games, decent teams, good teams, good teams. Cincinnati is going to be playing in SMU and Houston. They're going to be playing teams that lost to Texas Tech. And who did SMU lose to? It was just 2 weeks ago. Can't remember a decent team, another American Conference type team. Okay, Michigan's at 6, and we know where Michigan State's going to be at 7. That continues to be an issue, but it's going to work itself out. So that's where you can say it's going to work itself out. For as many times as I jump on people to say, do not say it's going to work itself out, in terms of the entire deal, it will not work itself out. But the Big Ten's going to work itself out. For example, yes, because they all play each other. We had all these teams playing each other. It'd work itself out. Oh, Mike, you thought Michigan was going to be 4? How was that going to happen? Okay, Mike. See, again, similar to my rankings, you can't just say Michigan was 6 and they beat a good team on the road, so they should go to 4. Well, who moves down? Who are you going to move down? How does that make their resume that much better? Makes their resume better, but not by that much. as opposed to last week and maybe the weekend before, I'm going to keep my patience and listen to the committee chair. So we can all listen to the committee chair together for as much as I want to fire up the phone lines and get this thing going. Thank you, Cheryl. Hit the like. What they're talking about right now in the comparison between the Oregon Ohio State situation and Michigan State, I completely agree with. If anything, there's more justification, much more justification. It's not even close, justifying Ohio State above Oregon than justifying Michigan above Michigan State. Joey missed on this point. Have we seen a team come close to Georgia? Their name's Clemson. Their name is Clemson, Joey. They came close to Georgia. Did you watch the game? I understand the point. Georgia's been dominant. I've made that statement as well. Georgia has been dominant over its schedule, not against Clemson. All right. I am going to be taking phone calls shortly. Let's hear from the committee chair, see what they say. And we got our Michigan contingent here. You know, Kansas, the new number one. You know, Kansas. How about that? We did a little Texas talk today here at the Voice of College Football. Sorry I was late. Sorry. Lost track of time. Was rushing back home. Okay, we can't take commercials. We just can't take that. All right. Okay, trying to catch up with you guys. So be ready to tell me on the phone and in the comments, obviously, what does not make sense, what doesn't make sense, what is intriguing in terms of where it stands now and what you anticipate happening this weekend and next weekend. So we've got 3 weekends of football. That's what it comes down to. We got 3 weekends of football. The SEC is taking the week off, basically. Why they would want to do that from a marketing and business standpoint, I don't get anyway, but the SEC is doing fine. So far be it for me to tell the SEC how to run its business, but the entire conference is taking the week off. They're getting the Ole Miss Vandy game in, one conference game, and I'm almost, Florida and Missouri are playing. Auburn's playing South Carolina. So that's 6 teams. So the other 8 are playing, the Sisters of the Poor. They're just taking the week off. All right, let's get this chair on here. Let's hear what he has to say. Jonathan's watching from Texas, big Aggies fan. Good to see you. Took it on the chin last weekend. Could have been in this conversation still, as Texas A&M, I thought, was the highest, the 2-loss team that could have made a move and been a factor. Of course, gone to Atlanta possibly, but that's all said and gone. Unfortunately, we've got a Alabama shutdown of the SEC Western Division. All right, here we go. Oregon's been playing terrific football. I would love for him to explain to us how Michigan's a more complete team than Michigan State. He needs to explain this. The more complete team. Kenneth, I'll answer that question as soon as we get done hearing from the committee chair. Okay, we've heard enough. There we go. Let's fire up the phone lines and get everybody fired up for some conversation on the playoff rankings. Appreciate everybody being here and being patient. I just wanted to hear what he had to say. He's not answering my question about why Michigan State's ranked below Michigan in comparing that situation to Ohio State and Oregon. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. There are some points within that argument that I think are justifiable or valid, but if you put it all together, it doesn't make sense. Okay, thanks for being patient. I got the phone going. Now I just need to get the site rolling here. Oh, don't play that horrible music. This is always the race I run here to try to get this set up before they start playing that horrible piano music. But it's playing. It is playing. There we go. Now I got to be able to hear y'all. Yeah, 2 calls coming in 3 and 4 and 5, 6, 7. Stand by, stand by, stand by, stand by. Let me get a couple promotions in. Hit the like button. Go to Patreon. Check out my picks. Check out everything else we've got going. And God bless those people that just jump on Patreon and say, Mark, you don't need to do anything. We just want to support what you do. So Patreon, MarkRogersTV. You can go to the link that we have in the description section, or just go to Patreon and search MarkRogersTV. Also, you're shopping for Christmas. When you shop on Amazon, use our link in the description section below. All right, folks, here we go. Phone lines are open. Let's see who kicks us off here at the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, it's Ben.
Hey, Ben, what's going on?
Oh, not much. Excited to talk a little bit of this college football playoff with you.
I am too. I'm excited to talk college football playoff rankings with you, Ben. Let's get to it. What you got?
Well, actually, can I start with your ranking?
Sure.
And I want to go with that, and then kind of maybe switch over to the college football rankings. And I wrote, I sent you a comment.
Okay.
And I kind of just going to paraphrase a little bit, I think. But when I looked at your rankings, like, to me, I see maybe bias towards Ohio State. And, well, here's what I'll read it. I say bias towards Ohio State because for this reason, you put Oklahoma at number 2. And to me, it's like you did that to justify putting Ohio State at 3. And I can see Ohio State being ranked high. I think they're a good team. I mean, I think they deserve to be up number 1 or number 2, number 2 or number 3 spot, not number 1, number 2 or number 3 spot. But when I look at Oklahoma, I think you have to put Alabama, Michigan, Michigan State, just based on resume above Oregon. I don't see any way of putting Oregon above those three teams.
Okay, hang on. Can we back up a little bit here?
Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Your first point is that I'm biased toward Ohio State, so I'm going to enlighten everybody right now because I tell the truth. I'm transparent.
Yeah.
Am I biased toward Ohio State? Yeah, if there was a lie detector, I probably am. I try to fight it as much as I possibly can, but I've been an Ohio State fan for 45 years. So
yeah, no.
We could go through all my rankings from the time I started doing this, and I bet beyond a shadow of a doubt, I would lay my mortgage on it that I have ranked Ohio State lower than the AP poll or the college football playoff rankings more times than I've ranked them higher. I guarantee it.
Yeah.
Okay. So right now I've got Ohio State at number 3. And they've got them at number 4. And you're telling me that I'm overranking Ohio State because they should be where?
No, actually, I think you're overranking Oregon.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if it's a bias because of. I think it's a bias because I thought either it was a bias because of just putting the head-to-head, having to honor the head-to-head, or because of Ohio State. I'm looking at one of those two scenarios when I'm looking at your rankings. Because when I look at Oregon, I think they're maybe number 16. I mean, if I were to make the rankings, I would put Georgia number 1, Alabama or Ohio State, either one. You could go 2 or 3. They're so razor close, in my opinion. And then I would put at 4, I'd put Michigan. And then I think even Ole Miss over Michigan State. From there, it's really close with a lot of other teams that are fighting for Notre Dame. You can look at Cincinnati. I think they're all very close.
You're going to put Ole Miss above Michigan State.
I mean, just from eye test, maybe. I mean, okay. Maybe. I think
Auburn. They lost to Auburn by 2 scores, and they got annihilated by Alabama, 28-0 at halftime. Okay.
I don't buy Michigan State. I don't buy Michigan State as being a. I know they won, but I just don't buy it when I look at it. Just personally, I mean, if I was gonna try to stick with some kind of thing, some kind of like resume, I would have to put them up higher. But just personally, I do not see them being. I think if Ole Miss and Michigan State played, Ole Miss is going to take it to them.
Well, I don't play that game, so I'm not.
Yeah,
I don't do that when I do the rankings. I don't say because I just think it's irrelevant. And I hear people saying that all the time and people saying that to me. And then what do we see every week? Every week we see teams lose to other teams that we would 2 weeks earlier, we would have said, well, they'll definitely beat them. Well, then we've got 10 games every week that don't turn out that way. So why not just rank the teams on what they've done, not what we think they would do against somebody else? So my one point on Oregon, I am very perplexed and I'm in a tough spot with Oregon. So I very much admit this, that I don't believe that Oregon has the second best resume in the country. And the College Football Playoff Committee, they should be honest and say that Oregon does not have the third best resume in the country. They don't. But what do you do with everybody else? When they beat Ohio State, the game wasn't that close. It was a decisive win. They were missing their best player. They were missing 5 impact defensive players. They played it on the road where Ohio State almost never loses. How do you get past that game?
Yeah. No, I look at that game but I also do not think Ohio State was at their best. I think Ohio State is playing much better now.
Yeah, but
think,
see, this is another argument we can have, and I'm not saying that your point, the point you just made, is a valid point. It's how do you approach the rankings? Do you approach them as this is a complete season and all the games count the same, or do you approach it as we are building towards something? And we want the 4 best teams on December 3rd to be playing the next month. Well, in that case, then we need to approach it much differently, because basically we need to weight the wins. We need to say your win in week 1's only worth 1/10 of a game. And then your win in week 2 is worth 1/5 of the game. And you add it and basically, if we're going to do it fairly, each win goes up by 1/12. And then by the end of the season, that win means the most. And I'm not being facetious.
No,
I somewhat am, but I'm half being facetious when I say that. But USC in 2016 had one of the 4 best teams in the country, but they weren't going to go in the playoff because they were 9-3. But they beat one of the teams that was in the playoff, Washington, by 2 scores, and they won the Rose Bowl, and they finished number 3 in the country in the final rankings. But nobody was going to put them in the playoff because they lost 3 of their first 4 games. But by the end of the season, people thought they were one of the 4 best teams. So do we just put them in and say, forget about the 3 losses early? Then we're basically playing preseason exhibition games in September. We're saying, these are just kind of to warm up.
Yeah, I mean, so Mark, when it comes to the way you ranked it, and you put Oregon over Ohio State, if I were to go by the way you base your rankings, like not my personal feeling, I think it would have to be Georgia, Alabama, Michigan State, Michigan, Oregon, Ohio State.
Yeah,
and
I get that.
I think Michigan has to be placed over Oregon, because in your top 25, Michigan beat 2 of your top 25 teams. They've played 3 of your top 25 teams. Oregon's played 1 of your top 25 teams. I mean, even though it is Ohio State and they're a higher rank, they played 1 and they did win that game. But their schedule is far less impressive than Michigan's schedule. And Michigan has a common opponent with Oregon, which Michigan also outplayed better than. I mean, they played Washington better than Oregon.
Yep.
So I mean, if you have to go that, I mean, I'm thinking if you have to go and that's the way I looked at it when it came to your. But the head to head. I just think you have to kind of not. I think you have to, because I think just you can tell by the eye test, Ohio State's a far better team. And I think just like we were talking, just like now when if we transition over the college football playoffs, when they were talking about this kind of same thing, and you were making the point that you can make a far better argument for Ohio State to be ranked over Michigan State, and I agree with that. I think we're on the same page as far as that goes. I mean, you can make but I think I think Oregon's getting too much credit here, and you have to something has to break somewhere.
So even though my rankings don't agree with your, I don't want to say your logic, don't agree with your approach, I will say that I agree with what you're saying. This is a good conversation, and this is the point I try to make when I throw my rankings out there and say they're not perfect. And I'm open to the discussion and the debate. They're not perfect. They're flawed. Everybody's rankings are flawed and can be picked apart. And so I open it up. And these are the kind of conversations I enjoy, because basically what you're saying is that I have basically given Ohio State, I've had them, how do I phrase this? They drive the rankings in those first 4 or 5 slots. So I've placed everything on Ohio State in a sense to say Ohio State's playing this. They're playing this well. So they go here, but Oregon beat them, and I'm going to honor what I continue to stand on, that it was a win head-to-head, and Oregon has not lost since, so they have the same record. So I'm going to put Oregon ahead of Ohio State, and then these other teams are going to have to be moved behind them, Michigan State in particular. Whereas you're flipping that and saying, I'm going to look at Michigan State and just basically say that they're better than, and you're making the direct comparison between them and Oregon and saying, I believe Michigan State have better resumes, put them in front of Oregon, and then say, okay, if you're going to honor the head-to-head, then Ohio State's going to have to be at the back of the line. I get it. But when you talk about Ohio State playing so well, we're all a captive of recency bias. So we can talk about bias, but I think recency bias grabs most of us. And Ohio State looked amazing against Purdue. Purdue, their defense is playing everybody well until they hit Columbus and got trounced. But Ohio State wasn't. You made a comment in there and I lost track of it, but I was going to jump on it immediately because you just shoot, I forget what you said, but basically what came to mind was the Nebraska game. Well, you could make all sorts of comparisons about how Oregon's played teams and that Ohio State game against Nebraska. That was not a thing of beauty. Or even really the Penn State game. Even the Penn State game.
Wait, I'm not understanding what you mean because I'm looking at Oregon struggled quite a few times. Yeah. Are you talking about, I don't understand your comparison.
Ohio State has a better resume.
Are you talking about just...
Ohio State has a better resume than Oregon. It's not even close.
Yes. No, not even close.
You made a statement, and again, it was, if it's more than 3 minutes ago, I don't remember it, but I should have capitalized on it at the time. But it just had to do with everything you were talking about concerning Michigan, Washington, and made a comment about Ohio State dominating and how great they look. Well, it was only 2 weeks ago. They didn't look so good against a 3-7 team. They barely won. They clinched that game with 90 seconds left in the game.
Yeah. No, I understand that. But, this is Nebraska compared to, Nebraska's probably, and you can't, I know we're reverting out of this argument of resume. Nebraska's got losses, but probably, how many losses does Nebraska have now?
7.
5? Is it 5 losses? They've lost 7 times.
Yes, they're 3-7.
Yeah, they're the best 7-loss team probably in the history of the sport because they've taken everybody. They've taken everybody to the wire, and they've done it consistently. They just can't find a way to win.
Yeah, they've beaten Fordham, Buffalo, and Northwestern.
About that. Yeah. So it says something about Nebraska. Where they're not, at least they're not getting blown out. So Nebraska looks like an outlier. They're a what's the term? They're a special case, and from my evaluation purposes. I know you can make an argument against it, but you got something's got to break somewhere because
I wouldn't have an issue.
That's what we're looking at.
I would not have an issue if somebody argued that Oregon does not belong in the top 4. And they would make the same argument that is similar to the Cincinnati argument and say, and it's to a higher level because the Pac-12 is for as much as we ridicule the Pac-12, it is still substantially better than the American Conference. But we would basically say, Oregon, we're not rewarding you for playing one game this season. That's what we're saying to Cincinnati, or at least I am. We're not going to reward you for playing one game. You beat Notre Dame on the road. That was great. That's a great win. But why does everybody else have to play 5 or 6 of those kind of games? You play one game. We're not going to reward you all the way through for playing one game. Oregon, we're not going to reward you for beating Ohio State because you play in a horrible league that's not close to the 2 top leagues in the country. and is even decidedly worse than the Big 12 and the ACC, so we're not going to reward you.
Yeah. No, I actually agree with that. I mean, I make that argument that Oregon doesn't deserve to be in the top 4. And even though Ohio State lost the head-to-head, I think Ohio State deserves to be there, and for the reasons that they're just a better team. I mean, they have a tougher. They have a more by far. Just like you were saying, their schedule.
They're a better team.
But I mean, I don't want to go over that again.
They're a better team. I'm going to say they have a much better resume because they play in a tougher conference, and their resume just gets better and better and better every week. But I don't know that Ohio State I don't know that Ohio State would beat Oregon if they played again. I think they would, but Ohio State could play Oregon like they played Nebraska 2 weeks ago, and Oregon could beat them again. Oregon did not have the player that is going to most likely be the number 1 selection in the NFL draft play in that game that nobody can block. And they were missing other key defensive players in that game, and they still won.
Yeah. I mean, that's impressive. But here, it comes down to this then. You want to put a team like Oregon that's played one game against a really good team, Ohio State, or you want to put a team like Michigan who that's played, 4 really good teams, 3 for sure, if you don't want to count Penn State.
No, I count Penn State.
2 for, okay. But I mean,
think they're good.
Well, actually, I would say, yeah, but you played and they have one loss to a team that's a good team. Oregon lost to Stanford. So do you want to put that win against Ohio State above? Then what if they're so good to beat Ohio State? Then what business do they have losing against Stanford?
Well, that argument,
do you want to put that
argument
above,
can be applied
do you
to
want to put that above what Michigan's done?
That argument can be applied to all sorts of teams throughout the years.
Yeah.
That can be applied to Ohio State in 2018. Don't lose to Purdue by 4 touchdowns. Well, you beat all these top 15 teams, but don't lose that game. All right, I better move on, but I appreciate the call, Ben.
Okay. All right, Mark. Catch you later.
Have a good one.
You have a good one. Bye.
Yeah, rankings are they're not easy. They are fun to debate. They're fun to compile. But sometimes you can kind of trip yourself up. And certainly people have different perspectives on it. And you guys have probably, if you've watched me for a while, understand the difference between when somebody calls and they've got some inane comment or perspective on something and I shoot them down because I'm like, you don't make any sense. You don't know what you're talking about, versus you disagree with me, but you know what you're talking about and you've got a good perspective. Let's have a conversation. All right. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line? Hello?
Mark?
Yeah. Yes, sir. Who am I speaking with? Hello? Yes, sir. Going once? Going twice? Hello? Okay. I don't know what happened there. He was there. Hello? One more time. Now he's gone. All right. Go to our next caller here at the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, it's the real MVP. How you doing?
The real MVP. What's going on?
Well, that was a heck of a interesting phone call you had with Exploring with Ben.
Sure.
It was a very good discussion. But my response to Ben, as somebody who will defend Oregon, is why play the game then?
Yeah, that is the thing. Why play the game?
Because if Oregon doesn't make it and they go 12-1, I would say we're never scheduling a great team again. Because there's no point. They would have no incentive. They'll be like, okay, we're not going. We're a group of 5 status.
Yeah. And then the argument against that could be, well, then go undefeated in your conference. Go undefeated against everybody. But then the counter to that is, well, we're not requiring everybody else to do that. And so either
Right.
we have an issue with the Pac-12 and we just say we're going to treat them like they're no longer a Power 5 conference, they're more like a Group of 5 conference. That's how we're going to treat them. Or, you know what the remedy is? Expand the playoff.
Right. Well, I think honestly, not even that's probably the most effective. I think it's better scheduling across the country.
Well, I think those go hand in hand. I think scheduling is the first step in reformatting the playoff. That should be at the core of then expanding and reformatting the playoff is let's deal with scheduling.
Yeah. So the thing, to answer your original question before you got on the phone call, the thing that doesn't make the most sense is Michigan still being above Michigan State. They had their chance to fix it, and whatever more complete team, Mark, if the more complete team, you think they would have won the game.
So when it was stated more complete team, the first thing I think of is if somebody says, I'm going to compare Wisconsin and somebody else, and this other team's a more complete team. Okay, Wisconsin runs the ball 80% of the time. I get your point. They can't throw the ball that well. Michigan State can run it as well as Michigan. They can pass it as well, if not better than Michigan. So I don't understand what he's talking about.
Right. I don't understand. Another thing that kind of surprised me was Ole Miss being in between Baylor, Oklahoma, and BYU. I thought Baylor, Oklahoma, BYU would all be together because they've played one another.
I wonder
so I don't know how that.
I wonder if we're overvaluing, and I'll include myself, BYU. Let's see here. Look at BYU.
Well, they're 14. They've beaten some Pac-12 teams.
Exactly.
So at least they've played Power 5 teams. I mean, unless maybe de facto they're in the purgatory zone, I guess.
They are, aren't they?
Yeah, it seems like we're treating them like that. They're in between the Power 5 and the Group of 5.
They are. They definitely are. I don't know where to put them. They play the oddest schedule in the country. I say that every time. I used to do schedule rankings during the off season. And I would make this comment about BYU every year. They play the weirdest schedule of anyone. It's a little bit more balanced than it usually is, but because they were able to pick up USC at the end, and that looks impressive. We know USC is not any good this year, but it looks impressive because what usually happens to real MVP is that BYU, they can schedule all these Power 5 teams in the first month and maybe into October a little bit. So their first 5 games look like crazy good. And then they've kind of got nobody to play because all the other conferences they're playing each other. So they're just running out there just trying to grab teams to play. And so it's like it's been the last 2 weeks, Idaho State and now Georgia Southern. One year, a couple of years ago, they played Wagner like in the middle of November. It's interesting. So they've beaten. Okay, Utah's a good win. Arizona State's a decent win. Washington State's an okay win, and Virginia's we could make a debate between Virginia and Utah being their best win. So those are the 2 best wins, and then Washington State, I'll give some value to, along with Arizona State. They lost to Boise State by 2 scores. Boise State's like 5-4, 6-4. They lost to Baylor by 2 scores on the road. Those are the 2 losses.
That's understandable.
Okay. I guess at 14. Is there 8-2 better than Texas A&M 7-3 and Wisconsin 7-3?
Well, maybe. I don't know. Well, who did Texas A&M? They lost to Arkansas, Mississippi State, and Ole Miss. Probably you would have them above them, honestly. And they got by far the best win. They got the best win in Alabama.
Beat Alabama.
So
they beat. Who else have they beaten that's any good? Alabama. Thought they beat somebody else decent, and I can't come up with it.
I don't know.
I guess not. They beat Auburn.
Well, oh yeah, Auburn. They're not ranked, are they?
Not now.
Auburn ranked?
See, that's the other thing about rankings that get kind of tricky. If you're the number 23 team in the country and you're playing the number 10 team in the country, you're supposed to lose that game, right?
Right.
Let's say it's a really close game. You playing really well. Let's say it's on the road and you lose by a field goal. Well, based on the way we like the records to look, let's say one of these teams drops to like 6-4 that was number 23 last week. So we drop them out of the rankings because now they're 6-4. We're dropping them out of the rankings. But actually, if you're number 23 and you lose to number 10 on the road by a field goal and playing really well, and it's basically a toss-up game, didn't you just substantiate that you're at least number 23 in the country?
You might even have a chance to move up in that scenario.
We probably, and this happened, it's happened a ton of times, but Mississippi State a couple of weeks ago was number 17 in the playoff rankings. I don't remember where I had them. They were number 17 in the playoff rankings. They played Arkansas, who then jumped into the rankings after they beat Mississippi State.
Yeah, barely, though. They were only 25.
And they beat Mississippi State on the last play of the game, missed field goal at Arkansas, and the committee drops Mississippi State all the way from 17 out of the rankings. And I don't think there's a perfect answer to that. It's all fluid and dynamic, and it involves other teams and where they're positioned, but it just goes to show you it's not easy. And if you're the number 17 team in the country, truly, and you lose a toss-up game on a missed field goal at the gun against a team that then jumps into the rankings, I don't know. It's just, it is difficult to assess.
Well, I would like to say that you were saying 23 is Utah, and they're actually favored this week against number 3, which is surprising.
Oh, well.
So Vegas.
I'm not too surprised
Vegas thinks
by
Oregon's going down.
Yeah.
No, but Utah's not. I mean, Utah might be the second or third worst ranked. Well, I think they're worse than UTSA, but I think I think 24-20. I think Mississippi State would beat Utah tomorrow.
Oh, I'll take Mississippi State in a game against Utah.
Right. So I also think Arkansas. I don't understand how Arkansas moved up 4 spots after beating LSU in double overtime.
Well,
I don't disagree them being 21, but I think they should have been there last week.
If that's all we're looking at, I totally agree with you, but I don't know. I'd have to look to see what happened around them. There might have been a lot of teams around them that lost, like an Auburn and other teams that did not look good and dropped. That might have elevated them, not necessarily that the committee thinks, okay, this is some great win.
That's fair.
Yep, go ahead.
No, you're fine. It's your show.
Well, I was just going to say, it's my show, but I can talk all night if I want to. You can, that's why I give you guys the floor. I can sit here for 5 hours if I really want to. I don't know if anybody's going to be listening to me in 5 hours, but I just don't think that there's been a time where I got hung up on these rankings because of a situation like Ohio State and Oregon. If there's a team early in the season that wins some huge game like Oregon did against Ohio State, and the team that lost the game takes off and is this team we thought they were going to be, like Ohio State, and the other team is either a really, 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 really good team and shows it against other teams, or they lose. or, or they fall off. And so then we can just kind of dismiss them. But Oregon continues to hang in there.
Oregon's kind of in the worst case scenario for the rankings, because if they were pulverizing teams, I would get them being 3, because they're only supposed to beat up on bad teams. But they're struggling against bad teams.
Yeah.
And you can't really punish them because of that win. But at the same time, if you did a poll, I think 90% of people, maybe even 95% of people would say Ohio State is probably going to win that game.
Mm-hmm.
But this is something I've seen in the projections. Do you think it's possible that the committee says, okay, Oregon, Ohio State, you're going to play again, first round of the playoffs?
Oh, the first round of the playoffs? Well, sure, they could play again. Absolutely.
Well, that's never happened, is why I'm saying it would be at first. Never happened. And last year they avoided it with Clemson, Notre Dame.
Yeah, but those were 2 teams that just played. Well, first of all, they played twice, not just once. And they also played in the ACC championship game just a few weeks prior to. Plus, Notre Dame was clearly the 4th team out of the 4. They were clearly number 4.
Yeah. Okay. And do you think it's fair to say that Oklahoma State is the lowest team that controls its own destiny?
Probably. Where are they? 7?
9.
I got to pull these up here. Yeah. So if Oklahoma State wins out, how can they be kept out? Well, I guess they could be kept out by Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, and Oregon. So they don't completely, but they're in great shape. Something's probably going to happen to help them.
Do you think a 2-loss Alabama would get in over a 1-loss Oklahoma State? Because Georgia has to play Alabama, and I think that would be a very interesting argument. A 1-loss Big 12 champ versus Alabama, 2 losses.
Well, I think Alabama's better than Oklahoma State, but I will be here pounding the table saying Oklahoma State got ripped off, that they won their conference. They only lost 1 game. They should be in the playoff over Alabama, who did not win a conference, lost 2 games.
And also, if you look at the Oklahoma State the last few weeks, I mean, they've been pulverizing teams. I mean, they haven't played good teams. They haven't played bad teams either, but they destroyed TCU this last weekend. Who else have they played? They beat up Kansas by like 50-some points.
They killed a TCU team that beat Baylor the week before.
Right. So I think if Oklahoma State was named with Oklahoma, they'd probably be higher in the rankings. Well, I'm not one of these conspiracy nuts. I just think that's the case. I think Oklahoma State's brand hurts them, because I think their resume this whole time's been better than Oklahoma.
Oh, it has been. Well, until they lost.
Right. Well, Iowa State, though. I mean, Iowa State's not a horrible team.
Yeah, but they lost.
I know they've got 4 losses.
So I had Oklahoma State ranked ahead of Oklahoma too until they lost. And Iowa State's not great. Yeah. They're okay. All right, man. Well, thanks for the call.
Yeah, it's good talking to you, Mark. Have a great rest of your show.
You too. All right. We keep it moving here at the Voice of College Football. No. We don't do that. We've got the phone lines open, folks. Apparently, I thought those were more calls, but they are not. So Georgia 1, Alabama 2, Oregon 3, Ohio State 4. Ohio State, a 19-point favorite this weekend against Michigan State. 19. Boy, that seems like way too much. But then again, 21 sounded like too much against Purdue. So Tony brings up a good point here that the committee initially ranked Oregon ahead of Ohio State, and that was smart to cover themselves. Because if they ranked Ohio State ahead of Oregon, they could never reverse it. But this way they can reverse it. At any point, they could say that was the win. That was the data point that launched Ohio State above Oregon. So maybe it's coming against Michigan State. Maybe it's coming against Michigan. Maybe it's coming in the Big Ten championship game. They could wait for any of those times they could wait till the Big Ten championship game and say, Wisconsin's better than Utah. That was enough to push Ohio State. That was the final data point we needed. Boop. They go above Oregon, which may only be, well, it could be decisive if they're still 3-4. Obviously, that 4 ranking would put somebody in a position to have to play Georgia versus having to play whoever, Alabama, Cincinnati, whomever. All right. Got a super chat here somewheres. I would like to recognize if I can find it. Man, there it is. All right. Appreciate that so much. We got Christ Savior 888 chiming in. Thank you so much for the contribution. Helps build the channel. God is great. Mark is good. Oh, we do not belong in the same sentence. Harbaugh is crazy. Spartion. Thank you so much, Christ Savior 888. We recorded another enjoyable segment with Steve Dace in Michigan podcast this afternoon. That was fun. It reminded me of that. The Harbaugh is crazy comment. Jim Harbaugh was more enthusiastic, ecstatic, happy. That's the way it looked after the Penn State game than I've seen him as a Michigan head coach that I can remember. Maybe he was back in 2015 at some point or 2016, but I do not recall him being that exuberant after a win. Yeah, Daryl, that Georgia team just seems like they are nearly unstoppable. You are right. Not necessarily unstoppable on offense, but impossible to move the ball against. Tennessee scored a quick touchdown. A lot of people were looking forward to the Tennessee offensive matchup against the Georgia defense to say, man, this Tennessee, I saw a listing on Twitter of the offensive rankings of the teams that the Georgia defense had faced to outline how good Tennessee was offensively and that Georgia was going to face a big challenge. Well, they gave up a touchdown in the first possession and then they shut it down from there. And then the next time Tennessee found the end zone, it was garbage time and it did not matter. It was 42-10. Oh, man, am I behind in the chat? Did Mark just say y'all? I said y'all, but I didn't say it well. I didn't say it like a true native Southerner. And then I quickly corrected myself to even point out that I sounded awkward in saying y'all. I think Jim's on here all the time touting this Oklahoma State-Georgia matchup. Blake is bringing the Missouri conversation into the playoff talk here. Missouri should have expanded and upgraded facilities when they jumped to the SEC, but they did not. Failed to do that. Oh boy, I said y'all, and some people took off on that. There we got calls. As soon as I say the lines are open, there we go. Very nice. Welcome to the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Good evening, Mark. It's George in Oregon.
What's going on, George?
Yes, I'm using my James Earl Jones voice.
I hope you're not sick. Are you okay?
You have no, I'm not sick. You have 224 people in the chat. Uncle Lou has 189, and I was watching Pete too, but he only had like 27. But anyway,
showing me 255 right now.
Okay, I'd probably have to click on and click back off. Anyhow, this is hilarious. I'm doing Uncle Lou's chat while I'm watching your show and doing your chat. And then I called into you and I went into his chat and I said, hey, everybody, I'm on Mark Rogers' channel on hold. Come on over here. And then I said, Lou, come on over. He has 224 in the chat. You only have 100 and whatever it is, you know.
George. Why did you do that? Why does that matter?
Just because my season's over. I'm coming up with creative things to do.
Stirring the pot. We love Uncle Lou. And Pixie.
I know,
and Pete.
he loves us too. Yeah, it's all in good fun. Hey, I was being so nice to Georgia for the last few weeks because I was in shock. You know how when a person's in shock, they don't respond. But I just decided to cheer for Georgia. Like, why not? Let these poor, long-suffering souls, 40 years with nothing to show, 4 decades. Let them win. Let them get it out of the way, you know?
So
and I was in Uncle Lou's chat.
Yeah. Yep. Go ahead.
I was in Uncle Lou's chat being friendly, and some guy jumped in and started talking about Mrs. Mullen and sticking her tongue in a player's mouths and having sex with them. And I flipped. I'm done with it. I'm cheering for Alabama. I'm making Stetson Bennett jokes again. It's over. My kindness is my weakness. I can't do that again. They mistook kindness for weakness.
Well, thanks for bringing that conversation to us here about Dan Mullen's wife sticking her tongue in players' mouths.
That's what they're saying. Those Georgia fans go, oh, backwoods, man. It forced me to point out to them the reason Jake Fromm left is because there was some kind of a vicious love triangle between Stetson Bennett, Jake, and Kirby. I mean, otherwise, tell me, why did Jake Fromm walk away with no NFL career? He had beat Florida 4 years in a row or 3 years in a row. Why did that kid walk away? There's something weird going on in Athens. And now Stetson Bennett's our quarterback. They have 45-star players and a 1-star quarterback. That is not Kyle Trask back there. That is Stetson Bennett. There's a big difference.
You know, George, you know what my experiment is when you get on here or anybody else and are not talking about the subject that is the predominant subject tonight are the college football playoff rankings. So that's why we're here. We're talking about the college football playoff
boring.
rankings.
We got 3 weeks.
So when
we got 3 weeks to go on that.
Yes, we do. When you jump on, I noticed 254. Now we're down to 230. So we've lost like 25 people. So you know what that tells me? We should be talking about the college football playoff rankings.
All right. I should have said something about the rankings, I guess. Oh, my God. Uncle Lou just put me in timeout. All right. Back to football. I hope he blocks me and bans me. He banned me for a couple of years. I don't care. Gives me back 8 hours a week. Okay. I'm exaggerating, 2 hours a week.
All right, George. Call me back.
All right.
On another night.
We're
talking about the rankings.
I got no jokes or nothing.
All right, George. Have a good one.
I'll see you guys
We'll
later.
See you soon.
Love y'all.
There we go. Let's get back to some rankings talk. I usually leave it wide open to any college football talk, and I would tonight to a certain extent, but obviously we're here to watch the rankings and respond to the rankings. So bam, that's what we're doing. Welcome in. Who's on the line?
Kevin, Dallas, Georgia. How you doing this evening, Mark?
I'm doing well, Kevin. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. I can't complain, and I'm trying not to look at the world through crimson-colored glasses. I know as far as our last conversation, I had stated as far as it'll all come out in the wash, but if I could restate that, Your Honor, I'll just simply state that when it's all said and done, Marcus, everyone's going to be there supposed to be there. I don't see it to be a matter of it being a lean one way or the other. as far as the next two games for pretty much everyone except the number one ranked team in the country will be pretty much playoff games. You know, Alabama versus Arkansas, Alabama versus Auburn, those are playoff games. As far as the next couple of games, Ohio State has playoff games. Next couple of games, even Boomer Sooner has. I mean, as far as on the Oklahoma State side, that is, will be, you know, playoff games. So it's going to play out, Mark. It's going to play out as far as the regular season games. And then, hey, yes, sir.
I always enjoy our conversations. I appreciate your phone call. Hope you know that. But I am not in the camp of it just works itself out. You know what works itself out? Right now in the Big Ten East, Michigan, Michigan State, and Ohio State all have one loss, and they all play each other. That works itself out because they all have to play each other. So that will work itself out. But all the rest of this, I don't think it worked itself out in 2014, 15, 16, 17, 18. The only year that it was clear-cut who should be in the playoff was 2019. It didn't work itself out last year. So I'm not one of these that just thinks it works itself out. Yeah, there's a conclusion. They make a selection. We get to the end of the line. We play our conference championship games, and then these 13 people tell us the top four, but that doesn't mean it worked itself out. That doesn't mean that there aren't teams that are going to get left out that have just as good a resume as teams that made it.
That is true, Mark. But as far as those dates that you stated, would it be safe to say that in each case there was the same team that got the short end of the stick, or was it different teams in each year?
2014, Florida State went undefeated. Then we've got 5 teams that won conference championships that had one loss. Ohio State, Oregon, Alabama, TCU, Baylor. Who do you select? And therefore, the teams that get left out, well, they can throw their hands up and say, we've got just as good a resume as the teams that made it. We could go through every year. Last year, why does Notre Dame make it with one loss? Texas A&M does not make it with one loss.
Well, I think in that particular case, Mark, there's always, like I say, as always, because then I would say that I'm going to cast aspersions against the Golden Domers, and under no circumstance do I want to do that. But it seemed like in that particular case, it was more of a beauty contest, you know, and that's, as far as in that particular case, Mark, I have to say that I had an issue with that just simply because of, I would say, Mark, it's safe to say that I may have a year or two on you, and by that being the case, our generation is a little bit different from the other generation in the respect that, as far as looking at Notre Dame as far as the Four Horsemen, et cetera, the younger generation don't see that. You have to sell them simply on, okay, great academic institution, has a football history, but I'm selling them more on academics as far as Notre Dame. So in that particular case, as far as last year, I had an issue as far as Notre Dame. There have been other cases in which, hey, University of Alabama got the short end of the stick, and as well as all the other teams have. And is that right? No. But it's unfortunately it pains me to. Well, I was going to say that it's the best that we have, but it's not the best that we have. It's just simply it's the only thing that, hey, they're willing to give any credit, any credence to right now, unfortunately. Yeah. And whether opening up the system, Mark, to more teams, I don't know, because, okay, will the other 40-plus states be happy when, okay, we're looking at it another couple of years when Oklahoma and Texas become a part of the SEC, and you're looking at doggone what, out of, say, maybe 12 teams in the playoffs, that at least a half a dozen of those are SEC teams?
A half a dozen?
Or about a minimum 4 teams.
Okay, maybe 4. Maybe.
But would the other 40 states be okay with that, Mark?
Well, first of all, I'm not so concerned with who's happy or unhappy. I'm concerned with fairness and inclusiveness in this case, in that I just want every conference to be represented. And then there's no excuse. Then the excuse becomes, if you don't get selected for a wild card spot, then and people are gonna complain. My team didn't get selected. We were 10-2. We played in such and such conference. You know what? Win your conference. But you can't say that now. You can win your conference and be left out of the playoff.
So we're looking at Mark say maybe 2 years with the expansion of the playoffs.
Well, when they proposed their 12-team format this past offseason, we talked about it. I believe that they said that this definitely would not be implemented by 2022. 2023, I believe, was the earliest, but now they're still back to the drawing board. So I know they just had some big meetings last week or the week before, and they're supposed to be unveiling whatever the next proposal is here very soon.
The reason why I asked is because one of the earlier callers had stated in regards to scheduling. And Mark, if you really want to, if you want to use some non-Sunday school words, Mark, as far as scheduling for next year, I would ask you if you have 30 seconds that you can blow, for lack of a better way to say it. Look at the University of Alabama schedule next year, and that will make you. It will make you stand on the top of the dome as far as Atlanta, or the top of the dome as far as in DC, and you will be like, my God, how in the world can this team be? Because at worst, as far as all the teams in the SEC next year, and I'm just using Alabama as far as an example. The only games Alabama, for example, the toughest game they have on the road next year is Texas, and which, upon further review, will that be their toughest road game next year? So by that being the case, next year is going to be the season in which everyone is going to be up in arms as far as scheduling, because the SEC across the board will be by far the worst scheduling in the history of the league. So you're going to probably have, at bare minimum, maybe 3 or 4 teams that will only have one loss.
So why do you think, or why is it your position that the SEC schedule next year is going to be much worse?
Well, I know that as far as when it comes to most of the teams that play, unfortunately, directional state, but as far as this year, just for whatever, I take that back. The 22-23 season seems, for whatever reason, it stands out more. I mean, a lot of people are up in arms in reference to this past weekend as far as New Mexico State. And then as far as early in the year playing Mercer. But for whatever reason, it seemed like the schools in the 22-23 season would make Mercer and New Mexico State look like doggone Ohio State and Michigan State. Because instead of just having maybe 1 or 2 directional institutions, it seemed like they have maybe 4 or 5.
Yeah, Alabama has 3. Is it 3? Well, they've got 2 extremely weak games in Louisiana Monroe and Austin Peay next year. Then they've got a Utah State game. But they also play Texas, Arkansas, Texas A&M, Tennessee, Mississippi State, LSU, Ole Miss, Auburn.
But it just appeared, for whatever reason, I guess when you name those first 2, I just honestly, Mark, I just couldn't look any further on the schedule, because I was just really done, because this is going to be, just add more fuel to the fire in reference to, because you look at it as far as also when it comes to this year, as far as the SEC schools playing Liberty twice, as well as playing New Mexico State back-to-back weekends, New Mexico State, Alabama, and New Mexico State as well with Kentucky this coming up weekend. So it just stood out when your earlier caller brought up in regards to scheduling.
Well, the SEC schedule stands out in that way because here we are in November and everyone else is loading up on schedules. Every other conference is playing its best teams against each other. And the SEC is kind of in the middle of doing that. Then all of a sudden they take this week off. They take this week off where basically almost, and even the teams that are playing in conference, you can see where they match it up in such a way that there aren't difficult games. Ole Miss is playing Vandy, Florida's playing Mizzou, which, you know, the Florida situation's a whole other deal. We won't get into that because that could be a difficult game for Florida now. But anyway, LSU and Alabama and Auburn. Well, Auburn's playing South Carolina. Anyway, I went through the whole list before, but there are 8 teams in the SEC, and it's usually practically the entire conference is basically playing scrimmages. I don't really have an issue with it. It just happens to come late in the season as opposed to everybody else front loads theirs. I don't really have that much of an issue with it as long as it's, I guess the one issue I would have would be, for example, if South Carolina was any good, and sometimes they are, I know it's been a while, but Auburn's got to deal with a conference game against South Carolina while Alabama's playing, well, they've got Arkansas. So they worked it out this year. I just would not want rivalry games to be played where one of the teams played a cupcake the week before and the other one did not. But I think the SEC is always taking care of that. If Auburn's playing a cupcake the week before the Iron Bowl, so is Alabama.
And one question I was asking, pardon, Mark, and it was in reference to, saw in the chat where it stated questioning Jim Harbaugh's sanity as far as him being crazy. And my question to you would be this, and that is, who is the craziest? Who is the guy that you should not have before a hot mic? Would it be Dan Mullen or Jim Harbaugh?
Oh, it's not even close. I would much rather have Jim Harbaugh running my football program.
But no, Mark. I just asked in reference to a hot mic. I didn't say about running your football program.
I'd rather have him doing that too.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, he says some kind of weird, strange things, but it's nothing harmful. Whereas Dan Mullen says some things now that, why would you communicate to your fan base that recruiting is just something that we really look into during the off season? Why would you not prioritize recruiting to your fan base? Why would you send that message to your fan base?
Well, could it be, Mark, as far as sometimes we can say more about what we don't say than what we say? Sometimes we can do more about what we don't do. And could it be stated in reference to him that he really don't care anymore, or at least as far as what he's doing right now? Just a matter of just going through the motion.
Well, yeah, he may think it's a foregone conclusion that he's gone, or he may want to be gone. I don't know that.
Well, as always, Mark, thank you for indulging me. Greatly appreciate it. And hey, look forward to speaking with as far as on the next occasion.
Sounds good, Kevin. Thank you so much. Have a good night.
All right, thank you too, likewise, sir.
All right, let's keep it going here. The voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, what's up, man? This is Will calling again, the Michigan fan. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing well, Will. How are you?
Pretty good. I had 2 quick things I wanted to get to you about, but the first one is I know we talked about this a little bit before, but I was wanting to get a little more insight because I talked about, Michigan being ranked ahead of Michigan State, and I was wanting to get, I know how I feel about it, but I know you're you just have a lot of knowledge with this kind of thing. And I have a lot of knowledge with Michigan football, but not as much with other teams. Are you in the bandwagon to where you think that it was wrong of them to rank Michigan State ahead of Michigan? Or are you in the bandwagon where you think it was right? And could you tell me, I guess, for either side you're on, why you feel that way?
All right. So this is not one of those discussions where I would say, okay, this is the side I'm on, and I really see no validation or no legitimate argument on the other side. It's just so one-sided. I think it's ridiculous that anyone would think the other point. So that's not the case here. I totally get the argument on both
Right.
sides. I don't think it's a ridiculous conversation. But Michigan State and Michigan have played very similar competition. It's not like comparing Ohio State and Oregon, two teams that obviously played. Michigan and Michigan State both played Rutgers. They will, after this weekend, both have played Maryland. They both played Nebraska. And even the teams that haven't been the same within the conference are similar type teams. They played a non-conference game against fairly similar competition in Miami versus Washington for Michigan. And of course, they played. So if Michigan's resume and their performance on the field was decidedly enormously better than Michigan State's outside of the game that they played against each other, then I would think it was a more valid argument to rank Michigan above Michigan State. But to me, that's not the case. Michigan beat Indiana more decisively than Michigan State beat Indiana, but Michigan State beat Rutgers more decisively than Michigan did. They both beat Nebraska by a field goal. You could go on. They both beat their non-conference opponents, who were both 5-5, by 3 touchdowns. I think their performance, aside from the game that they played, is very comparable and very close. But Michigan State won the game that they played. Therefore, I rank Michigan State ahead of Michigan.
Well, I certainly understand that aspect of it because that is the best. I mean, that's the best thing to point to is they played and Michigan State won the game. And, you know, and we could go on and on about it. It's just, to me, and I understand your side of it because you're breaking it down in a way to where it's reasonable. It's just when I hear people like Reese Davis and Paul Feinbaum and people, it just seems like it's just like utter outrage. Like the BCS is just scheming up something because Michigan has a bigger fan base and it's the bigger brand and this is just an outrageous thing and the BCS is crooked and they may be, but I just don't see it on that one. And I agree with all your points. I think that if we're judging them based on the game that they played against each other, personally, I mean, Michigan, to me, and the thing that I want to talk to you about is people keep talking about complete teams. To me, Michigan is the more complete team. I think Michigan State, and I'm trying my best not to sound biased, but to me, Michigan State without Kenneth Walker is a good team. Kenneth Walker in the equation automatically ups Michigan State to almost an elite team. It's a very top heavy team. And I understand, Michigan hasn't always looked good on the throwing game, but if you compare it to the game that they can play, because if we're comparing the head-to-head matchup, if we look at everything, Michigan threw the ball better than Michigan State did. Cade McNamara played one of the best games he's ever played against Michigan State. We were well-rounded. We had 2 running backs that were rotating in and out that were both doing big things. Defense was, to me, superior. It was just that common denominator that they had Kenneth Walker, and Kenneth Walker literally scored. I mean, he literally scored every point of the game. He literally scored every touchdown. Without Kenneth Walker, it wouldn't have been. There would have been nothing to it. Now, you still have to take into consideration he is a member of the team.
Yes,
you can't just discredit him.
He's
and
a member of the team.
He is part of the team, and I totally understand that. But he is the team. I mean, he scored every touchdown against Michigan, and like I said, I just don't understand why anybody could disagree that Michigan is the more complete team, because they are. And I'm not even going to get into the refs. Like I said, we talked about that last time. I think that honestly had the biggest factor in ranking Michigan ahead. Like we talked about before, I understand every game there's going to be a couple bad calls. That was something totally different. Michigan State literally could have given the referees the game ball after the game. It was literally that bad. It was bad call after bad call after bad call after bad call, all the way down to the very last play when there was obvious holding, and they let it go, and Michigan State got the ball back. So, you know, being a Michigan fan, and I know you could understand being an Ohio State fan, when you see all these outlets, not your program, but more like ESPN and places like people like Paul Feinbaum, and they're just railing against your team. And you know, you have to look at stuff like that. And to me, I don't see how anybody can make an argument that Michigan State is a more complete team. You know, they've got one player that is extremely elite, and I'm not hating on Michigan State, but you just have to look. I just think we just have to look at everything that goes into it. I mean, if you look at the score, they won the game. There was probably 6 or 7 completely bad calls throughout that entire game, maybe more than that. They literally took a touchdown away from us. But you know, if we're going to just go bluntly just off the score of the game, well, then we could say they're the better team. You know, but I just don't understand where the outrage is coming from. That's my main thing. It just seems like everybody is just unbelievably outraged that Michigan State is ranked behind Michigan, and it just doesn't make sense to me when you look at that game and you look at how close it was, and then you look at all the bad play calling, and even with the bad play calling, it was not the bad play calling. When you look at the bad refs and the calls they made, even with the refs going against Michigan, it was still razor close. So that's my big thing. The other thing I want to talk to you about, and this is kind of off the playoffs. What do you think about Jimmy Lake getting fired at Washington because he slapped that player's helmet? Do you think that was the right thing to do or not?
Well, I know that the Washington athletic director or whomever was making the announcement and released the statement from the university said that it didn't have to do with any one particular incident. I got to think that if Washington was 8-2 right now and not, what are they, 5-5, 4-6, that Jimmy Lake would still have a job. So I think it also has to do with he just has not been impressive in his development of that team. So I think it's a combination.
Yeah, it seemed like that gave him a way out. I will say honestly, I was kind of baffled a little bit because the media made it sound like he hit a player. He struck a player in the face. He slapped the player's face mask with a play sheet, a play call sheet, a laminated play call sheet, and then he pushed him. Now I understand like the 19s, like with Woody Hayes, like uppercutting a player. You know, I understand stuff like that, but are we getting that soft in the game of football? Where I mean,
Apparently.
anything. I know I have more of a problem. Yeah, I mean, I have more of a problem with Oregon's head coach when he chewed out his player a couple weeks ago. I had more of a problem with that because I don't like just public shaming.
Yes.
You know you're on TV. You know everybody's watching you. You know that the camera's focused on you, and you just continuously go on a 30-second raid because you want to show your dominance over a player. And I have a problem with that. But just a little here, slapping a helmet with a play sheet, I just think you got kind of a bad rap on that, the way they tried to turn it into a abuse against the player. I just think we're just getting too soft.
We are getting too soft in our society. There's no question about that. And that doesn't mean that there wasn't a day and time, as you just referenced, when it was too far the other way. And there had to be some changes made and some people held accountable to say, you know, this isn't responsible adult civil behavior to be hitting players, in intimidating players and that sort of thing. But yeah, football is an intense game and it's played by men, and there's a tough mentality to the sport, tough physically, but also tough mentally, the mindset, the approach, and it's an intense game. And I don't pretend to know where that line should be. We all have it in our minds at a different place, but yeah, I don't know what kind of damage a play sheet does to a guy wearing a helmet. So obviously from a physical standpoint,
helmet. Yeah.
it's ridiculous to even argue that. Now, is there kind of, you know, again, it doesn't have to all be about the physical aspect of it, as you just mentioned with Mario Cristobal and his player. And I saw that incident. I didn't like it at the time because, yeah, there's a way to do that. There's a way to handle it, knowing that you're on television and that's going to be shown. So you are shaming that player.
Yeah, it really brings me back to the Jim McElwain to get with the Florida player. Like, I think that was probably the worst one when he literally went off about 45 seconds screaming and hollering. I mean, it was just, he knows he's on. These coaches know they're on TV. But as far as just a little something here and there and a little slap on the helmet or something, I just don't see a problem with that. The last thing I want to say, and I'm going to let you go because I know you got other callers, and I'm just going to make a comment. Mark my word on this, Mark. I believe I'm right now. And, talking about Michigan State, I'm not hating on Michigan State, but Michigan State's going to lose their next two games outright. They're going to lose to Ohio State. I don't know yet whether it's going to be by a little or a lot. We'll know Saturday, and then they're going to lose their last game against Penn State. Penn State, I was at that game. I didn't realize that Penn State considered us a rival. See, that's the problem with Michigan. Everybody considers us a rival. Every game we play, it's a rivalry game. Whether it's Ohio State or Michigan State or Penn State, everybody wants a piece of Michigan. I don't know why, because we haven't even done that much. And Michigan State is never going to be our real rival. I don't care what Jim Harbaugh says. Ohio State will always be the real rival of Michigan. It doesn't matter whether Michigan State's beating us or not. That is our 100% factual rival. And they're never going to be able to take the place of that. It doesn't matter if they're winning or not. But look, I'm going to let you go, Mark. I appreciate you taking my call. I'm sorry for motor mouthing. And just have a good night.
No worries. Thank you so much for the call. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.
And so the caller there definitely had a point on the Michigan side. So I could have stated the same thing that he did. The Michigan argument in being ranked higher is that, okay, if two teams are being evaluated and we lost 37-33 on the road, forget the score for a second. It could have been a 1-point game. It was a 1-score game. It was right down to the wire, last possession. Well, if you're losing that game on the road, and statistics tell us that there's a decided advantage at home, well, we're evaluating those two teams. If they play at a neutral site, what can the conclusion be? That it's a toss-up. So they lost the game on the road. And then, as mentioned, not only are Michigan fans complaining about the calls made in the game, the Big Ten office succeeded that there were missed calls in the game. So the Big Ten office actually has apologized to Michigan to say there were missed calls in the game. So I have no issue with somebody making the judgment based on those factors to say Michigan should be ranked ahead of Michigan State. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark. How's it going? This is Emmanuel.
Hey, Emmanuel. What's going on?
Not much. Hey, I always have the worst questions, but you always have the best answers, Mark. So I appreciate that.
Worst questions, best answers. Well, I appreciate that comment, but I can't imagine that you've got the worst questions. But let's hear the next one.
All right. So I wanted to look at two things affecting football recently, which is the transfer portal and early signing.
Okay.
I wanted to get your thoughts on do you think those are good for football, or are they more hurting football?
Well, let me attack the easier of the two, which would be the early signing period. So you're talking about the December signing day versus February.
Yeah.
Okay. So I did not think that the backlash from coaches was as strong as I anticipated it to be when it happened. But I do remember certain coaches, Urban Meyer probably being the most famous, saying he did not initially like the early signing period. But once because when you think about it, they're busting their tails basically all year, but specifically since the last week of July going into August. And if you play a conference championship game, that sets you into December 4 or 5 days. And all of a sudden you've got to turn around and deliver this class in 10 days. And there's probably a number of players that are on the fence that you really want to target in those last 10 days. And then you're preparing for playoff games or bowl games, whatever it is. And we start playing bowl games on the 17th or 18th of December, which is only a couple days. It's usually and going to be this year again. The first bowl games are going to be the Saturday after the Wednesday of National Signing Day. So those teams that are playing in bowl games, they're trying to prepare for bowl games at the same time that they're trying to lock up a recruiting class. So none of that made much sense to me either. But it seems to not be, I don't hear any complaints from these coaches. Some of them say, we actually like that we're getting this all wrapped up and done, and we're working on the next class, and we can get into the next year and play our last game, our bowl game, and we've pretty much sewn up the class, and we can move on from there and focus on spring practice. And so there hasn't been much issue there. And if anything, I think the impetus for moving up National Signing Day was more so for the player benefit that these athletes had expressed, not any particular group, but just in general, that they get worn down by the recruiting process. It's probably enjoyable for them to a certain extent, but getting text messages and calls from coaches all the time, and of course there are dead periods in which they are given a respite from that, but it can be tiring for the student athletes aspect as well, because even if they commit to a school back in July, they're still going to be recruited because a number of them flip, of course. So I think it was done more from the student athlete perspective to get it over and done, because it had been the basic feedback that most of them had already made a decision and wanted that to be finalized and done so they could move on with the rest of their senior year of high school and not be hounded by coaches for another 2 months. And if they chose not to, they could wait until the February signing date. In terms of NIL, I don't think there's any way to gauge right now the impact on the sport. The impact on the player is beneficial for the most part. Money always magnifies everything, and money always makes things more complicated. Money can be a good thing. Money's a tool. Money can be used for good. Money can be used for evil. It's a tool. But we all need it to live. And there was no reason for these student athletes to be deprived of the opportunity based on their performance on the field and the fame that they gain from that to benefit from that. So I think it's the American way. I was all for it. I am not going to be ignorant to the possibilities, the negative ramifications from it, which could be jealousy and so forth in the locker room that could divide teammates and factions of teams and all of that. And it distracting, just being another element of a distraction for a student athlete to take them away from workouts, football, studies, and all those things while they're negotiating with, this business and this corporation and that one. We have unfortunately, this just further pulls us away from where this all really should be. For being honest, it should be that these athletes go to school and they are students that play a sport on the side. That's what it should be. But it's not that anymore and hasn't been for a long, long time.
Agreed. Now, when in regards to the transfer portal, when a student transfers, does that take away a scholarship from the recruiting class?
Yes. So, yeah. So if you put that particular player on scholarship immediately, as soon as they transfer, so let's say, sometime in August, there was, I would think that there has to be some level of, so I'm spitballing here. Understand that I don't know the ins and outs of the scholarship limits and the rules, but I would think that there would be some kind of grace period, meaning that if your tapped out on your 105 roster spots and 85 scholarships, and it's the middle of the summer, that you have some leeway, because if you denied bringing on an athlete, if you said, okay, well, if the rule was we cannot expand our roster anymore because we've hit our limit, well, the day that you're denying an athlete from transferring to that particular school, the next day somebody could enter the transfer portal from that school, and suddenly they've got a scholarship open that they didn't have open yesterday, and they missed out on those opportunities. So I would think that there's some kind of, they have to stay within a certain scholarship limit, and probably there are checkpoints throughout the year. And but I also know that the NCAA gave an expansion of, I believe it was 7. I don't know if it was 7 scholarships or 7 roster spots or both, for this next season, because of the super senior rule and all these athletes that have stuck around. Obviously, with all these athletes, and it's a domino effect, because it went down through the other classes, not just affecting the seniors, but it gave everyone the opportunity for an additional year of eligibility. Well, that would obviously impact your recruiting class size and would grossly limit the number of high school players that want to play college football to be given that opportunity. So they didn't want to do that. So they expanded the rosters and the scholarships by 7 for this next football season. And then they said that they would reevaluate after that.
Got it. Yeah, no, I was wondering about that, just because these are pretty new things to college football that only been implemented a couple of years. But last thing before I go, I'm looking at the rankings, and I see that most teams have about 20 commits as of right now, 18 to 20. And I'm looking at Arizona because I'm always watching for the Pac-12. Arizona State has 5 commits. So what are they waiting for, I guess, when you have, I'm looking at pretty much, I'd say about a good 50 to 60% of the teams already have about 18 commits. 20 commits.
Wow.
How do they, that's an interesting strategy. I'm really shocked to see that.
Yeah. I don't have an answer for
They're
you.
ranked 97 out of 100.
Obviously, their issues off the field are impacting their recruiting class.
Man, I just wish that, if I won the lotto, I would donate it to the Pac-12. They need all the help they can get. I don't know what's going on, but it seems like we're always last in recruiting, last in good coaching, last in passionate fans.
Well, before you would do that, I would caution you to have them explain to you and sign a contract on what they would do with that money, because I wouldn't just turn over money to the Pac-12.
Yeah, that's probably a smart thing, but I would end up donating it to USC anyway. Football needs USC, needs presence from the West Coast. It just really does. And I will let you go and let another caller go, but I am so looking forward to the USC hire. It needs to be a big name.
Well, there you go. I would think more or less it needs to be a good coach. Been a lot of good coaches hired in the last 10 or 15 years that didn't have big names. So you're right. You know, if you hire a big name who's accomplished a lot, you know that he's a good coach. So there's some security and some benefit to that. But obviously, you just want to have ultimately the best guy. Well, thanks so much for the call. I appreciate it.
Hey, Mark. Always a pleasure talking to you. Have a great night.
Absolutely.
Bye.
You too. So let me get to a couple super chats here. We got Brian Plato. He should be one wise individual. Thank you so much for the super chat contribution there. Why are the Texas Longhorns so bad? Gig 'em. They have culture issues at Texas. They had them before Steve Sarkisian. He's either incapable of cleaning them up or he has not had enough time. So I would agree he's not had enough time, but that doesn't mean he's capable of it. He may never clean up the issues with Texas football. Texas has a talented enough team to be 7-3 or 8-2 right now, not 4-6. I don't know why Steve Sarkisian was hired. I'm on record many times of saying this at the time to say, I'm not predicting that he's going to be a failure, but I would not have hired him. I don't get it. I don't understand. Just because you worked for Nick Saban for a couple of years and you had this prolific offense, which I think we're seeing a trend. Alabama fans would have to remind me who the offensive coordinator was with the Tide before Lane Kiffin. But anyway, since Lane Kiffin, you could go on through the line, Steve Sarkisian and Bill O'Brien. Hello. They recruit the best athletes. They've got the best players. They've got dynamic players at every position, an offensive line that's amazing. Not necessarily this year, but an offensive line that's amazing in the whole deal. So every offensive coordinator at Alabama, as long as they know what they're doing, is going to be good. They're going to score 1 million points and ring up ridiculous yardage totals. This is not difficult to see. So does that qualify you to run one of the top 5 to 10 programs in the country? When you showed that you mishandled Washington and USC. And of course, we know what the off the field issues were at USC, but taking that aside, and that I'm sure affected his job performance. But if you look at what he accomplished or failed to accomplish at Washington and USC, he was, if anything, worse than his predecessor and his successor. So in terms of a resume, I don't see how that qualifies him for the Texas job. Now, he may turn out to be the guy and he may turn it around, but I'm on record as of the hire in saying I would not have hired him, and I don't know what qualifications he has. All right. We've got another super chat or two in here if I can find them. I always like to honor them, of course, and they're often attached to questions. So our next one's coming in here. Well, we've got our guy, Falconer X. Falconer X is the king of the super sticker. So Falconer X, whatever a super sticker is, we appreciate it. Thank you so much for the contribution and for being here. And for those people that want to know what the call-in number is, I apologize. I am sorry that I just posted it here in the last 5 minutes. That's a bad habit of mine. 860-499-3332. It's on the bottom line ticker. And there might have been one other super chat. Maybe, maybe not. Man, am I behind in this? Okay, that must be it. I still haven't gotten to the bottom of the comments. You guys are pumping out the comments tonight. Wow. I'm like scrolling this thing as fast as I can. Oh, there we got 2 super chats. Let me get to those as well. We've got Justin. Thank you so much for the contribution. Appreciate that so much, Justin. Ohio State, Michigan State will be a great game. Go Bucks. Hit the like button, please. Absolutely. Hit the like button. Consider contributing. If you have a connection to a possible potential sponsor, please hit me up at MarkRogersTV at Gmail. Justin, thank you so much for that. We will have analysis from both sides, meaning Michigan State and Ohio State, on this big game in the Big Ten East, the biggest game of the year in the Big Ten thus far. We just released analysis on the Michigan State side today. We will do so for the Ohio State side tomorrow. And of course, our Ohio State Buckeyes live show is tomorrow at 1:30 Eastern on the Ohio State channel. So join us for that. That will be a big time. Super chat coming in from Ben. Thank you so much for that. I have to show my appreciation for all your great content, especially considering the obvious challenges you face doing so as an Ohio State fan. Yeah, the brain doesn't operate that well as an Ohio State fan. So there is a challenge there. That might be my excuse. Super chat. Thank you so much. Appreciate that coming in from Travis Walker. Thank you so much for that. Much appreciated, Travis. Good to see you. I saw where somebody else, and I lost track of their comment because there's a zillion of them, had commented that they subscribed tonight. So anybody that's listening right now that's not subscribed, please do. The benefit to you is that you hit the bell for the notifications to know when we go live or when we upload new content. The benefit for us is we just want to build a subscriber base and continue to build this channel and all the 25 team channels. So there's probably people listening to me right now that don't realize that we've got, my goodness, Ohio State, Michigan, Nebraska, Penn State, Iowa, Wisconsin, Oklahoma, Texas, Notre Dame, Oregon, USC, Texas A&M, Florida, Auburn, Tennessee, Alabama, LSU, Florida State, Virginia Tech, Clemson, and Miami channels. All those. All right. I am now also considering why the viewer count was probably different on what George saw versus what I'm seeing, because we're simulcasting on other channels. Got 2 calls on the line. Let's take these 2 calls, then we'll wrap it up for the night. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, it's George.
Wait a minute, George.
You're
George, what's the
missing
rule?
some super chat.
Am I missing? I just read off a bunch.
No more than
no
more than twice a night.
No more than twice a night, unless
Right.
you remind me of super chats that are there. So,
Right. You miss them because you don't stay current. You're like an hour behind, or half an hour, or 20 minutes.
Well,
you got to keep. You just got to spin past 80
I've been
comments and catch
spinning.
up.
I am down to the bottom of.
Yeah.
Did you hear the super chats I just read off? I read off about 5. I think I caught up with all of them.
All right. Did you see Cal 1? COWONE, Cal 1?
I don't see that one anymore.
I think he's a new guy. But he said, I'm a perfectly straight guy, heterosexual. He said that you have beautiful blue eyes and good hair.
That's I will take that comment. That's an interesting one.
Right.
Beautiful blue eyes. Well,
I said Cal 1. I told him, I said, Cal 1, I don't care what you say. That's overboard. Stop it. We all know Mark has nice eyes and good hair, but we don't talk about it. We don't talk about it openly. All right, back to football.
Yes.
Texas freaked me out.
Oh, did I miss No, I think I caught up with everyone. I think I got them all. I hate to miss super chats. I hate that. But all right, George. Thanks for calling in. Let me know about the hair and the eyes.
Wait, I was talking about
what?
Texas. I was talking about Texas.
What about Texas?
They freaked me out.
They suck.
They freaked me out, man. Like, how can they do this for they're like Georgia. It's been 40 years or something.
No.
I'm thinking Florida. I'm thinking Florida's going to save their program by hiring a good coach and fix it in 1 year. How come Texas never did that? I don't get it.
They keep trying.
Go so long without hiring a I don't understand.
They were playing in the national championship game in 2009 and won one in 2005. So that's
all right.
A little different than the Georgia
5 years
thing.
better than Georgia.
5, it's 25 years better.
All right, one more thing in the
Yes.
chat. We were all having a big thing, and one guy was saying the athletes are employees; they make money for the university, and other people are arguing about the benefits and all that. But in Black's Law Dictionary, the word employee, employer, this is literally true. Go online to Black's Law Dictionary and look up employee, employer, and it says master, servant. These terms are synonymous. So people want to tell me about slavery. They don't even know what the legal word master or employer employee means. And they go and give an application which has a serious legal definition. You applied for it. So now it's voluntary servitude, not involuntary, which is illegal. So everybody's getting what they bargained for. We could pay them as independent contractors, 1099 them, give them money. There's all kind of ways we could do it. We could set them up as an investment for the university because they get lasting returns for them. You know what I mean? It pays on into oblivion. They're still using Tebow's image and likeness, blah, blah, blah. We could set them up as actors in the entertainment industry. There's all kind of ways we could do this, but we decided to do it as master servant. They make an application to security. I mean, the university accepts it and they let them have a job as a student. That's what's going on. Any lawyer could fix this that was honest, but they don't want to apparently because it's worth billions and billions of dollars to ESPN and those other channels and networks and universities and professors, administrators.
All right, George.
Everybody's getting rich. All right. Go Alabama.
There you
Talk to
go.
you later.
See ya.
Bye.
So I spent a portion of my day yesterday with my daughter and her student loans and making phone calls, trying to circumvent some of it, trying to figure out better ways to deal with the student loans. So anybody who says that student athletes are not compensated, I will hand them all my student loans. We can hand those to you. Yes, student athletes are paid. They are paid with a scholarship. Now, we can have an argument as to whether that's enough, but they are paid for their services in playing for that university. Whatever that's worth, $30,000 a year, $40,000 a year, whatever, depending on the school. So they are compensated. We can have the argument, the debate, the discussion, whether it's enough, but they are compensated. They don't play for free. All right. Next up here at the Voice of College Football, who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, it's Travis.
Hey, Travis, what's going on?
Hey, how you doing, man?
I'm good.
I saw something that kind of caught my eye that I thought might be interesting for the committee to figure out. Saying that Ohio State beats Michigan and Michigan State, you're going to have Cincinnati sitting at 5, assuming they win out, and then assuming Notre Dame wins out, they would move up to that 6 spot more than likely. You got a Cincinnati, a group of 5 school, sitting at 5. You got a Notre Dame 11-1 that does not have a conference championship sitting at 6. You know, it's just kind of interesting. Then, you know, behind them, you got a possible, you know, Oklahoma State conference champion and a Wake Forest ACC conference champion. You know, what do you do with, you know, a Cincinnati, a group of 5, and a Notre Dame that doesn't have a conference championship on their resume, which apparently is, you know, a big deal. I just see the committee kind of sitting there going, what do we do? What do we do? You know, I wanted to see what your take there is on those two teams kind of log jamming up the front there.
Well, this year is no different than any other year. So the committee has had to deal with whatever's been presented to them. So this year's no more difficult than any other year. Obviously, each year varies in difficulty, but they've all been difficult except for 2019 was pretty clear cut. So they're going to make a decision on, you know, since 2014, they came up with these tenets of, you know, winning conference championships, playing difficult opponents, performance on the field, etc. As we've gone along, they've gotten away from those because that has boxed them in. And all they tell us when it comes right down to it is they're going to select the 4 best teams. which is a rather moronic statement to make because they don't know who the 4 best teams are. Nobody does. They could say we're going to select the 4 best resumes, but they don't even say that. They're just going to select the 4 best teams. So I am almost positive, because it's happened 6 out of 7 years, that there are going to be teams left out of the playoff that have just as good a resumes and just as good of an argument as teams that are in the playoff.
Yeah. Yeah. I thought it was interesting that since Oregon's lost their one loss to Stanford has not won a game since.
Yeah, it's a
They had
bad
lost
loss.
Six straight, I believe. It might be 5. And I think they lost the game before that, before they played Oregon. So they might have lost the past 6 out of 7 games.
Yeah, they're 3-7.
I think they lost. I think they've lost 6 straight, maybe 5. I don't know, but they haven't won a game since that. I just thought no one's ever brought that up. I've never heard anybody on anything I watched bring that up since Oregon's lost. The team that beat them has not won a single game. Always thought that was interesting.
If Oregon makes the playoffs, they will no doubtedly be the team that will carry the worst loss into the playoff.
Yeah, especially if Stanford doesn't win another game.
Well, it doesn't matter now whether they win another game or not. It's the worst loss by a playoff team.
Yeah.
Well, the other one would be Michigan State lost to a 5-7 Nebraska team. But that 5-7 Nebraska team was playing in a much better conference than this 5-7, potentially 5-7 Stanford team.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think about this game this weekend? Michigan OSU. Michigan State OSU. I'm sorry.
Well, I think it's going to come down to Michigan State's ability to put some kind of pressure on CJ Stroud, because their secondary is proven incapable of holding down passing offenses. Aiden O'Connell threw for 536 yards against them. Talia Tagovailoa hit him up for 350 last week. And those aren't inflated statistics. They're all meaningful throws during competitive games. So Michigan State's got an issue containing the pass, and that's not the issue you want to have against Ohio State.
Yeah. I'm thinking if OSU can contain Walker, which Walker's going to get his. He's going to get his. I'm a mad, if we hope, I'm an Ohio State, I live in Columbus. If OSU can contain Walker to at least 100 yards, that would be fantastic. But he's going to get his. He's going to eat either way. And if they can contain him and force Michigan State to throw, I feel like they're good. But if Kenneth gets off to a start where he's racking up, getting into the 200s, and Michigan State's that's going to be their best chance if he goes off.
Yeah, it also chews up the clock.
What's that?
It also chews up the clock. If he's running the football and gaining first downs, it doesn't have to be 200 yards, but he's going to chew up the clock and keep the Ohio State offense on the sideline.
Yeah. And OSU's O-line plays like they did last week and gives CJ time to just do his thing. It could be another Purdue score. If the O-line can come together again and play like they played against Purdue, that was shocking. I was actually a little nervous playing against Purdue, just given what they've done in the past to OSU and this year top teams. It was, but that O-line came together for the first time like I've seen all year. I mean, it was beautiful. So hoping we can pull that off again. But I figured all the teams would remain the same in the top 7 after taking a closer look at this weekend's schedule. I think this weekend's matchups are going to set the tone for what's to come, because there's a lot of good games on this weekend that are going to set the tone for what's coming here shortly with the playoffs and everything. And I figured it would stay the same, and OSU wouldn't jump anybody. And I believe they beat MSU. They will jump Oregon next weekend. What do you think about that one?
Do I think Ohio State's going to jump Oregon if they beat Michigan
Oregon,
State?
if they beat Michigan State, or are they going to make them wait?
I have no idea what the committee's going to do. I have no idea. Trying to predict what they're going to do. I have no idea.
Yeah.
They can take any stance they want. They can wait for this game. They can wait for the next game or the next game or never, and say Oregon's always going to be ahead of Ohio State. They keep winning. They can justify any of those. They could have justified it before. They could have said Ohio State's finally gotten to a place where the resume trumps this head-to-head win by Oregon. They can do that at any time. There's no magic formula to it. It's based on their judgment.
Yeah, every year they get new people and it's new rules. You never know what each year new people will make up some new stuff, but it'll be interesting. I imagine Saturday's game will be the most watched college football game of the year up to that point. So it's going to be a good one. I'll be watching. Appreciate the content. Talk to you later, buddy.
Hey, thanks so much for the call. Appreciate that.
All right. Thank you.
All right. And I was going to take those two calls and no more, but we've got somebody waiting. So I, being a kind soul, welcome to the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hi, this is Tyler.
Hey, Tyler.
Nice to talk to Mark.
How are you?
Hi, I was wondering because I'm good. How are you? So I was wondering because everyone's been talking a lot about Ohio State versus Oregon, and that whole head-to-head thing. I'm just wondering, it doesn't seem like people are ever looking at like the resume of Oregon compared to like even the rest of the top 10, because I don't know if you ignore just the fact that Ohio State is there, which they're kind of shoving Oregon up the rankings because of head-to-head. Mm-hmm. I don't know if Oregon's resume stacks up to teams like Cincinnati or Michigan State.
Well, take out the first one. It stacks up against Cincinnati's. The other two, no, it does not.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say Cincinnati because they're a group of five, so beating Ohio State's really good compared to that. But I think that both Michigan and Michigan State have better resumes than Oregon, considering how bad that Stanford loss is.
Yeah, they do. Yep.
So it just seems kind of weird how Ohio State, they're forcing Oregon to be put above Ohio. They're forcing Oregon to be put above Ohio State when there's probably at least 2, 3, or even other teams below them who are probably better and have better resumes than Oregon.
Absolutely. So we had a caller, I think our first caller of the night said the same thing, and I agreed and said, if you're going to honor the Oregon win over Ohio State, then you can do it one of two ways. You can either say, we're going to have Ohio State drive this conversation. They're going to drive the discussion, and they've got a better resume than Michigan State, and these other teams. So we're going to bring them all the way up to, let's say, number 3 in the country. But Oregon beat them and still only has 1 loss. So Oregon's going to be ahead of Ohio State. So we're going to put them number 2 and Ohio State number 3, then the rest of the teams. Or you can have Michigan and Michigan State drive the conversation in that comparison against Oregon and say, Michigan State, at least those two for sure. You could argue Cincinnati, since they have no losses, and say they should all be in front of Oregon. And if you honor Oregon's win against Ohio State still, then that's going to push Ohio State to the back of the line. You can do it one of two ways if you're honoring head-to-head.
Yeah, but of course, when the committee puts Michigan over Michigan State, they stop honoring head-to-head. They count a game that happened 2 weeks ago more than a game that, and they forget about a game that happened 2 weeks ago, but they care so much about a game that happened like 8 weeks ago.
Well, again, you're opening up a fascinating discussion where there's no right or wrong. It just depends how you approach it. Are we valuing each game exactly the same? Weeks 1 through 12? Or are we saying we want the 4 best teams at the end of the season? Because otherwise, if you're just looking at resumes, that Michigan State game should be counted just the same as Ohio State and Oregon. Or are we saying, well, that's more recent, so it's more valid?
Yeah, I don't know if that's necessarily right, but I don't think that counting the game that happened way earlier in the season is any better than counting the game that's more recent. Like, you can either count them both the same, or you can count the game that happened earliest as less valuable.
Yeah, well, you shouldn't count it as more value. That doesn't make any sense.
It seems like that's what they're doing, just because of home and away.
Well, that's part of it.
Mm-hmm.
They're certainly taking into consideration, and they're also supposed to be taking, or so they say. I'm not saying that this is what they're supposed to be doing, but they say they take injuries into consideration. And that Oregon team did not play with its best player against Ohio State.
Oh, I did forget about that. I thought you were going to mention the Stanford thing because they had a lot of injuries there.
Well, they did there too. But Kayvon Thibodeau missed the game against Ohio State, and they had 5 key defensive players miss that game.
Yeah, that is a thing. That's just another element, I guess. There's just a lot. There's a lot there. A lot of poor results that Oregon has turned up ever since that game, in terms of struggle wins and that loss.
Absolutely. Anything else?
Yeah. No, that's all I had.
Well, I appreciate the call.
Thank you.
Have a good weekend. Or where are we? We're on Tuesday night. Have a good weekend. I'm thinking it's like our Saturday call-in show after the games. All right, everyone. Appreciate everybody being here at the Voice of College Football. So Wednesday's just an insane schedule. So it looks like this. We go live at 11:30 in the morning with Nebraska live for an hour. Then 12:30 Eastern time, Oklahoma live. Then at 1:30, Ohio State live for an hour on the Ohio State channel. All these are on their team-specific channels. And then at 5 o'clock Eastern, Michigan live. At 6 Eastern, Florida State live. At 7 Eastern, Miami live. 6 team live streams tomorrow. Again, that's Nebraska at 11:30 in the morning Eastern time, Oklahoma 12:30, Ohio State 1:30, Michigan 5, Florida State at 6, and at 7 o'clock, Miami, right here at the Voice of College Football. One other thing, I don't know if this interests anyone. I took some time to figure this out, so I hope it interests someone, because I should go ahead and cut these videos and post them because I've done the homework. Basically, I have figured out the championship scenarios. What has to happen in the Big Ten Western Division between Wisconsin, Iowa, Minnesota, Purdue? I've worked out all the scenarios. The SEC Western Division, that's crazy. Well, it's not crazy. Alabama's going to win the division. We pretty much know that. But just for argument's sake, for discussion's sake, it's possible. I have figured out a 5-way tie. There could be a 5-way tie in the SEC Western Division. Alabama, Mississippi State, Texas A&M, Arkansas, and Auburn all could finish at 5-3. If Alabama loses to Arkansas this week and Auburn, they would finish 5-3. And there's a way we could have a 5-way tie for the SEC Western Division. Then, of course, we've got the Ohio State, Michigan scenario in the Big Ten Eastern Division. And was there another one? Those are the ones I'd worked out thus far. So it was the SEC West, the Big Ten East and West, And I guess just those three. I thought I worked out the ACC as well. The ACC, yes, where's that? Anyway, I did the ACC as well. So I got to work on those videos, and hopefully somebody will enjoy them. All right, tomorrow, 6 live streams. Pick your team or pick them all. Nebraska, Oklahoma, Ohio State, Michigan, Florida State, and Miami, right here at the Voice of College Football on those team-specific channels. If you just want to help us build what we're doing here at the Voice of College Football, please subscribe here, but also subscribe to your favorite team channel, and subscribe if you're just wanting to help us. Subscribe to those channels that are under 1,000 subs, especially Iowa. We're like 794. We need to get to 1,000. Everybody listening to me right now, subscribe to the Iowa channel. We'll make this deal. Subscribe to the Iowa channel. And even if you don't want to watch the Iowa content, as soon as we get comfortably over 1,000, go ahead and unsubscribe. That's fine. But get us to 1,000. Subscribe to the Iowa channel. I will love you for it. That actually would not be the proper definition of love, but you know what I mean. Right here at the Voice of College Football. See you bright and early, 11:30 in the morning, Eastern Time, Nebraska Live.